Bala Town Council is a backwater village with sleepy rhythms in Kole district, northern Uganda. Until 2005, it was under the clutches of the Joseph Kony-led Lord's Resistance Army insurgency. When the guns went silent, the government in October 2007, with the help of Western donors, midwifed the phased Peace Recovery and Development Plan as a strategy to eradicate poverty and improve the welfare of the populace in northern Uganda. The Poverty Alleviation Program also targeted West Nile, Karamoja and Laon sub-regions starting in 2009. By the time it phased out, the anti-poverty scheme had been beset by numerous challenges that limited the goal of northern Uganda catching up with the rest of the country, a 2013 report by Refugee Law Project noted. Then came other Marshall Plan programs such as the Northern Uganda Social Action Fund, which was supposed to close last year in March. David Alele, a trader around Bala Town, is convinced that the Parish Development Model, the government's latest poverty antidote blueprint, will improve his financial standing.
When this money comes, I think I will add on what I have, at least to add more stock. If I'm being given some money, then I add on what I have, will at least keep me going on.
He has rallied 25 other like-minded colleagues to prepare for the Parish Development Model.
Our plan as a group, we want to extend in agricultural production so that when this money comes, we can even put some of this money on agricultural sector to help the group.
Kole district, according to the last Uganda Bureau of Statistics national headcount, has a population of 239,327 people. Agriculture, particularly subsistence farming, like elsewhere in the country, is the source of livelihood of 91% of the population here. The crops grown mainly include maize, coffee, beans, millet, sweet potatoes and some matoke. The Parish Development Model, launched by President Museveni last Saturday in Chibuku district, targets such groups as beneficiaries.
Number one, from Okukore Chida Chonka to Okukore Chida Nensao. Secondly, do so with the Chibaro.
The plan is to eradicate poverty among 68% of households across the country.
So, when they say this very poor, say no, it's not very poor because he's getting enough food, he's getting government health care, he has got education, and therefore he's above the poverty line. So don't mix the two figures. When the 68% I was talking about, the ones who were outside the money economy, yes, they were outside, but still they were not so bad off because of the work of the government and the work, even that Okukore Chida was solving some of their problems by getting calories.
According to several policy documents, the Parish Development Model is a strategy for organizing and delivering public and private sector interventions for wealth creation and employment generation at the lowest economic planning unit. The scheme's budget was increased from 200 billion shillings this financial year ending in 3 months to a whopping 1 trillion shillings the next 2022-2023 financial year budget, starting in July, when each of the 12,000 parishes is expected to receive at least 100 million shillings. Since the last campaign elections, the NRM has preached this Parish Development Model gospel across the grassroots as ministers and ruling party MPs continue to traverse the country, selling the project to rural masses as the magic bullet that will eradicate poverty. But 3 months before the program can be fully rolled out, the specific guidelines to be followed in distributing the money are yet to be revealed by the responsible ministry. There are also several unanswered questions, such as where has the scheme been piloted and what lessons, if at all any, were learned from the most recent schemes. This, as a sense of consternation sweeps across the country, with fears that the much-touted poverty alleviation scheme could turn into another bottomless pit, just like other pet projects that collapsed.
The issue. Main purpose of program was
There is barely any government audit on the predecessor schemes to give insight on why they failed and what can be improved on. The most recent, a Myoga scheme launched by President Museveni in August 2019 to propel 68% of Ugandans in subsistence production to commercial production and promote access to financial services by association in the run-up to the 2021 campaign elections, was mismanaged.
The longevity of these projects, 3-5 years. They start and they stop. They start and they stop. As a result, we are kind of on a seesaw that way and that way, that way and that way. I think that we are talking about changing cultures. We are talking about getting people in the rurals, but also in the peri-urban and urban, to change the way they operate, to change the way they work. And so you don't expect it to change in 5 years, to be realistic. So the idea of projectization of our development, which links into the overall, shall I say, beggarization of our economies, badly affects what we do in terms of the efforts. And when I say beggarization, our focus tends to be on, lack of resources. And so we write project papers, we go with a bowl and ask for money.
You need to understand, these projects are political projects. And political projects constantly reproduce themselves. So they need to find a new language to capture a new political utopia, right? Which they know will not succeed, but it's politically beneficial. You know, politically it gives them mileage. They appear to be doing something. What you might call a very symbolic gesture. We have a government of symbolism. This government has mastered symbolism, appearing to do something, when you know the ultimate end. And like I said at the very beginning, it's passing on guilt. Even if I give a local person 5 million, which is way higher than what they're going to get, even if to 100, you give it to one single person in this country, in this town, because of the hostile environment they operate, they can't reproduce it in the next 5 years to be out of poverty.
For long spells, capital injections into every problem, including poverty alleviation, has remained a constant in the government's playbook. The Poverty Eradication Action Plan was Uganda's first poverty reduction strategy, prepared at the behest of the World Bank, which saw the country's debt forgiven under the heavily indebted Poor Countries Initiative in 1998. The International Monetary Fund posited in one paper on Poverty Eradication Action Plan that poor people must be able to participate in this growth, both by expanding smallholder agriculture and by increasing employment in industry and services. End quotes. Then came a host of other poverty alleviation schemes from the Entandikwa, the Plan for Modernization of Agriculture, and the Universal Primary Education. Rural development consultant Sam Iga says that the over-projectization of an otherwise good cause explains their performance.
It can be linked into the other challenges very readily. What are the other challenges? Why did they fail? The idea of politicizing the whole thing. Forgive me, but I've heard people say, even people in office who say, you know, this is our chance also to have some of the money that remains up there, is to have some of the money. They are thanking us for voting wisely. And so right from the start, as the money comes in, one, there is that idea, resources, we want, and two, we were not meant to take it back anyway. And so if you look at it, a lot of the time, we do not look at it and say, how much did we put in, how much did we recover? Why did it not work? And that is another, the politicization. A third problem is outright corruption.
He said poverty alleviation, especially in the rural communities, requires a mindset change.
PDM does have, in structure, it does have what it takes. What does the PDM have? It has a number of pillars. One of them, key, is mindset change. To tackle this idea of omwami ayenda ina amaido ate n'abaana benda ina ebidandali, and therefore I'll grow the groundnuts on a small patch and I'll grow the beans on a small patch. Ninze mwene nenda ina okulya soya, so I grow the soya bean as well. Before you know it, one little piece of land has got 5 different legumes. and we are putting money in there, what will happen will be that indeed they'll try and grow a little bit more beans, a little bit more groundnuts. So mindset change has got to be emphasized, that people will say, does it make sensible volume? Does it make marketable volume? Will I have enough to sell and be known for what I grow? When we are doing farming as a business training, we say, grow what you know what you grow, and be known for what you grow. You used to have people in Masaka who are well known for coffee. You are in Kampala and you say, I want to go to Masaka to Sonko's place. And they say, oh, Sonko, the coffee farmer.
A decade before the first scheme in 1997, President Museveni, who during the first year rebel professed Marxist ideals, had wholeheartedly embraced the neoliberal agenda of structural adjustment programs crusaded by the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The structural adjustment programs included privatization of all state enterprises, unbundling of cooperative societies, and liberalization of the market. With cooperatives in limbo, the rural economy, which was largely dependent on agriculture, was placed firmly in the hands of exploitative middlemen. Yusuf Serunkuma, a social researcher, argues that cooperatives were a formidable force in early post-independence Uganda.
You know, the struggle of cooperatives started in 1911. There's a struggle in this country for farmers to have access to cooperatives doing cotton and processing and having granaries. In this place, they had growers' unions after independence, because 1950, I think thereabouts, the ordinances allowing native cooperatives to work was passed. So Africans actually had even started small processing factories. So I'm sure you know, when you go in this event, you know a cooperative union somewhere, you know a growers' union, you know a rich man who was rich because of selling coffee in the 70s, because they were able to cooperate, right? So 1980, cooperatives are phased out. It's a deliberate policy to kill them, so that they can once again have access to the economy. So once they have access to the economy, the leader will stay as long as he wants if he allows Muzungu access to the economy. This is where we are. But I think we've deviated so much into, because now we're discussing the structure away from the actual project which is being implemented, which is simply politics. So for a government to survive, having hand over the economy, you have to constantly do symbolic things. Constantly. That, you know, there's restlessness, you need to put brakes to it. Throw some money into people's hands, then put some brakes on it. Then again, then throw some money again.
He observed that there are a number of shortfalls in the current program.
Ugandans, Africans will remain poor until they get on their banks. That's said by Dr. Suruma, who was very close to Bank of Uganda, who was the brain behind SACCOs, and this government failed him from implementing the actual version of SACCOs that he dreamed of in 1999. This was the man who was in charge of the Uganda Cooperative Bank. So he said, unless we get to own our banks, as Ugandans, we remain poor. So every time you hear the anti-poverty discourse, the lifting people out of poverty conversation, without the things that Dr. Suruma said, we are barely scratching the surface.
While the last 3 decades have been marked by neoliberal development model economic policy of growth at an average of 6% per annum, a 2013 report by Action Aid details that the outcome has been the maladjusted development, with most of the benefits going to a small business and political elite that are urban-based. I quote, "The collapse of cooperatives paralleled increasing income inequality and poverty as a predominantly rural phenomena. This in turn gave new impetus to rural-urban migration, resulting in what has been observed as a decline of the rural economy. The failure to address such inequality and poverty has generated debates calling for the revival of cooperatives as a significant institutional vehicle for rural development." I end quotes, the report reads in part.
Right? This is why a man like Ezra Suruma, who is aware and is willing to do something, is fired twice from the Minister of Finance. He's fired twice. He's aware and willing to do something about it. He's interested in having local capital generated, starting actual SACCOs. He's fired. As soon as he worked on the policy document for SACCOs, he was fired from the ministry, right? When he put his foot down to have UCB stay and not be sold, he was fired. They are aware, but you need to understand, giving access to our former colonizers to the economy is the whole political survival. They want our economy so bad. So you can do whatever you want as long as they have access to the economy. Right? So governments across Africa, especially in West Africa, and one of the big ones is in Uganda, for governments to stay for this long period, they have to hand over the economy. They're not mess you up, right? You need to understand that no African country is able to depose its leader on its own. Uganda has never been able to depose any leader on their own. Our leaders are moved and changed by our former colonizers. We get a new leader from our former colonizers. We've never been able. We didn't depose Amin because we're able. No. No. We didn't kick out Obote in 1986 because we're able to. No. That's the lie that has been circulating. No. No country is able to kick their leaders out of office without help. And a leader leaves if the Mzungu realizes you're being hostile to their access to the economy. What Museveni understood so well is if you allow those folks access to the economy, you're good to fly.
Former Finance Minister Ezra Suruma, who has been fired twice from government for crusading for indigenization of the economy, told NTV recently that local capital is key in poverty eradication.
Two very fundamental interests we have as a society in terms of finance. One is access to credit, because most of us do not have sufficient savings to be able to do, whether it's buying a bicycle or a motorcycle or a car or putting up a building or starting a business. Very few of us have enough savings to start without resorting to some kind of borrowing. So access to finance remains a major issue. Although we have, in my view, we have made some progress by introducing savings and credit cooperatives, for example, or microfinance. We have made an attempt to bring financial services to rural areas. We still have a long way to go. I'm hopeful that the parish model will assist in bringing services to every parish, because we believe that there should be a savings and credit institution where people can save their own capital and then they can use it as a basis of credit. I'm not expecting that money will come from outside.
In an article published early last month in the Observer newspaper, Dr. Suruma argued that Ugandans will remain poor until they have their own bank. He says that the foreigners that pushed for the sale of Uganda Commercial Bank, whose former headquarters is a shopping mall today, and later the closure of Cooperative Bank in 1998, have pushed the central bank to increase seed capital for a commercial bank to 150 billion shillings, up from 25 billion Uganda shillings.
That's where we are. The economies of the world are in more of a synthesis, in more of a kind of coming together in finding a way forward where the economy, the public sector and the private sector work harmoniously together, attempt to find the most optimal way to cooperate to bring about the highest, fastest growth and development of the country.
The list of anti-poverty schemes has been building over the years. Before the Imyoga, there was Operation Wealth Creation, which was an offshoot of the National Agriculture Advisory Services, or NADS, a statutory semi-autonomous body under the Ministry of Agriculture. NADS itself was designed to operate within the structures of the local government system and farmer institutions. The Parish Development Model, whose aim is to lift some 3.5 million households out of subsistence production to the money economy, is now going to the lowest local government, the parish, to increase household food security and incomes and improve the quality of life of Ugandans. NADS also was an offshoot of the Plan for Modernization of Agriculture, conceived to guide policies to enable the rural poor to improve their livelihoods sustainably, particularly by raising farm productivity. Then came Bonaba Gagawale, or Prosperity for All, the youth capital venture that later became Youth Livelihood Program, the Northern Uganda Social Action Fund, to now Parish Development Model, which officials defended will increase the effectiveness of infrastructure and service delivery, including agricultural extension and social services. the same purpose NADS was meant to serve. Some of the headwinds encountered by these programs are cross-cutting, particularly politics. According to a 2005 research titled Setting the Scene, the Ugandan Poverty Eradication Action Plan, co-authored by the now Executive Director of the NGO Forum, Moses Isoba, the first scheme, designed in 1997, was largely anchored on campaign rhetoric after the 1996 elections that pitted President Museveni against Paul Semogerere. I quote, "The economic growth that was being celebrated nationally was not visible in all communities across the country. There was a need for an alternative approach that could bring about improvements in poor people's livelihoods. When the 1996 electioneering ended, the incumbent president, who had been re-elected, gathered his policymakers and donors and took them to the rural communities in the Luero Triangle, a region where the 1986 guerrilla war had been started and thousands had been killed, for a poverty tour." I end quotes, the research notes. But many years after they triumphantly marched out of the Luero Triangle, the NRA's Mecca, where Museveni and his acolytes fought a 5-year guerrilla war, the area remains impoverished.
We can talk about the mindset, taking a business approach rather than a subsistence approach. But once that clicks, we then have got to get our people to appreciate that individually, we are too small to make any difference. But collectively, the Ugandan producers are so many, they can overturn the market. Many of what we eat in the cities today is subsidized by the farmer. How? Their labor is not costed, and their labor is their biggest input. But if we organize and they get into cooperatives and they get into produce organizations that are solid, Busoga growers, Banyankore Kweterana, Bugisu cooperative, and they're solid, and they can bid, they can be held accountable. Even at the smaller level, cooperatives cascade. There's a smaller unit which builds into a bigger unit which comes into the apex organization. Before you know it, then Malawi is poorer than us. The people have smaller holdings than us. Their reigns are worse than ours, but they're much more organized.
Also, while most of the projects have been anchored around agriculture, which employs 68% of the population, there is nothing to show for it.
As long as the populace, the people out there who produce our food, are trying to be food, by the way, sometimes they don't even try to be food secure. They just do what they know how to do, what their grandparents did. So mindset change, to me, is extremely key. The other thing that we've got to look at is, how does the mindset change of the farmer change, the mindset change of the farmer, without changing the mindset of the change agent? How much do the people at the district, how much do our agents at the parish, how much do our people at the national leadership level understand this whole idea of business? The whole idea of farming as a business, the whole idea of saying poverty, let's tackle poverty. You hear people saying, add value, but what do they mean? There's a difference between technical value addition and economic or financial value addition.
So if we know folks who are rich and they're fighting over markets, and they're taking money from Bank of Uganda, Harbour Group, if you know merchants such as people behind MTN, these are like middlemen, and they are our rich. If we know those people and they have public profiles, how come we don't know the rich men behind coffee, rich men behind gold? Do you see? And now we're told, oh, we are solving poverty. But you're not building around your cash cow. Our biggest export earner is coffee. There's no conversation around this thing so that people can actually, because they're already doing it. They're already doing it. So what is this 100 million going to do for every parish?
Over the last decade, the government has received plaudits from donors for posting economic growth averaging at 5%, neoliberal economic reforms that have seen foreign direct investment grow twofold, and revenue collections doubled. However, the World Bank says poverty is much more than the mere lack of money. It is about deprivation in other important areas of well-being, such as education, health, water, and housing. In Uganda today, politics has been commoditized in a clientele patronage setting where the elite buy the electorate vote for the highest bid. it appears that this straitjacket method of expenditure has been transplanted towards poverty alleviation, and the lens has only been fitted with economic jargon and metaphors and is devoid of pragmatism.